You're on.
You're doing the professional thing. Oh, I have to click continue to give permission. All right. Here we are. All right. Good evening, Seb Doubinsky in Denmark. This is James Reich in the morning in New Mexico, Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Seb is in the evening in Denmark, correct?
Exactly. 6 o'clock in the evening. Or since our key.
How the hell are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Good.
Still on holiday.
So we're going to talk again on. It's been a couple of months since we spoke, I think, but it's an auspicious occasion because we're going to talk about the publication of Paperclip, new book from Meerkat Press. And thanks already to Trisha Reeks for inviting me to be part of the conversation with you and to give me an advance copy of the book. And it looks, the cover is beautiful. I really love the way that some of the internal aspects of the occult and the plot actually have made their way onto the cover, which is really cool. Yeah, so thanks very much for the invitation. And I'm looking forward to talking with you, Seb, about all aspects of Paperclip. Anything you want to add by way of intro?
No, I just wanted to concur with you about the cover. I mean, I think covers are always really important for books, and I love actually every cover Stalking Horse has. It's also your own publishing company are amazing, and I think it's really an incitement for readers to a nice cover. You know, is important for a book or a relevant.
Yeah, I like that word. I like that word, incitement. Yeah, that seems like a good one, especially for you, especially for your political background and so on. So, so let's get into the book. I mean, but of course, Paperclip is part of an interrelated series in a certain world, and relates to other books you've written, tangential in some ways and connected in others. I was wondering how you might describe that world if someone was to pick up Paperclip and to wonder more about the world that you've been writing in for this length of time. How would you describe that? And maybe you could even talk about the origins of the impetus for writing in this space for such an amount of time, and what you've learned from that.
Actually, the intention came later. I mean, I wrote what became the first volume of the book, which is of the series, which is the Babylon trilogy. I wrote it between 89 and 93. So that was a long time ago. And I thought it would be just a trilogy that was it. And actually, I came back to the book. I came back to this environment because it allowed me to make very, very precise critical, social critical and political critical statements without having to go into the details explaining the history of this and that in our real world. So it's like a mirror world that echoes our society. The difference is called the City-States series, because instead of the states we know now, my countries are divided in city-states like the antique Rome, Sparta, Athens, whatever, with new names, new added to some of the cities. But they share, it's a half parallel story because there's World War II. I mean, we share the same events. It's like two dimensions superimposed on one place.
One of the things I really appreciate about your work is that, I'm just going to turn my email off because someone's trying to send me some spam, sell me something. I love the fact that you actually, I'm kind of obsessed with this idea. You don't spend a lot of time world building, right? You let the book take the world for granted. And I think, when we were talking just before we started briefly about the novella as a form and how compressed it is and what you can get into a short work like that, as opposed to a 600-page doorstop of world building. So can you talk about the novella as a form and why you chose it for this work, and any novellas that you have influenced you?
Well, actually, what really there are two things. First of all, about description. We're not in 19th century anymore. We have television.
I am sometimes.
Well, some of us, at least.
Being English, I slip into the 19th century pretty easily. Believe me.
I understand. Well, and the thing is, like, if you write, I mean, with you, I published Fragments of Revolution, which is like this pseudo Western, and if you say, you walk into the saloon Everybody has a saloon in their head. Everybody has seen a Western. Everybody knows what a saloon looks like. So if you don't have to describe the saloon, you just have, use some sounds, some colors, and people will build the universe. So that's the first thing. I think also the evocation has a lot of power and gives the reader a lot of freedom to build his own vision of the universe. And the second thing, which it goes back to what I've said about television. We are living in a world where the image lasts a few seconds and everything is like hacked, and when I wrote the first book, Diamond Trilogy, I was inspired. The first thing that inspired me was MTV at the time, like the short chapters and the publicity and the flashing and all these things. And I thought, and I think it's incredible that in writing, this has not come in. I mean, the first one to have done it without knowing it was going to become like that was Burroughs. So Burroughs has really influenced me, and also except for the last volumes of his trilogy, all his works are short, and I thought what I love of Burroughs was or Vonnegut also.
Yeah.
It's short. It's thinned out. You have what you need, and that's it, and if you want more, reread.
Yeah, there's something to that for sure. I feel like knowing you somewhat. I can feel and see the Burroughs influence in it, but it is that kind of short picaresque structure that's there, and I kind of feel like Vonnegut. I see some of John Brunner, science fiction writer, in that kind of media blip type of structure, and even other things that you put me in mind of just in conversation now, almost accidentally. It reminds me of the way in, I guess, Mailer's more experimental book, Why Are We in Vietnam? Thinking about revolutionary times and politics that you write about. That's also full of media blips and, radio broadcast and, kind of like ham radio stuff. I find that kind of fascinating. So is it true that, would you say that the Burroughs stuff comes through not just in, say, the structure, but maybe in the narcotics and the assassins, that kind of stuff in the book? Is that kind of part of your
absolutely
landscape?
There's one thing that really, really influenced me a lot, and for those who have read some of my books and the drug synth, Burroughs says in a couple of places, the junkie is the junk. And that really made me think, a lot about the identity, both of the character and who we think we are. And if you take the junk as also a metaphor of all the commercials and all these things, we are the environment in which we live. So that is, and the second aspect that was really, really important to me is actually not literature, it's pop art.
Yeah,
it's the way to use cliches and tropes and everything and publicity and turn it to something aggressive, turn it into something menacing, and I read the Paperclip comes from James Rosenquist's painting, and I read his biography because I was very fascinated. He died just before I started Paperclip, and he says, there's a big misunderstanding with me and Rauschenberg and Warhol that we're labeled as pop artists. We are anti-pop artists, and I think that sets the record right, And I'm being very plus. Sorry, I'm just finished with that punk. The punk scene of the '80s that really, really influenced me a lot because it's my youth.
I love Rosenquist, and you can sort of feel that. So there's a surface reading where you can look at Rosenquist and say, it fits in with kind of pop art and so on. But there's also there's a hard edge to that military industrial stuff that he puts in, and the
F-111
violence, whether it's cars or whether it's Kennedy and so on. Yeah, there's a real there's a darker side to what Rosenquist is doing sometimes, I think. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about it's something I wanted to ask you about, which is to maybe get you to talk more about the media environment that maybe we live in and the media environment in the book. Because I was thinking in Paperclip, you have these different layers of media. I wrote a few down. Documentary is one. Internet divination, sort of tarot cards by internet, is another. I think that would fit in, right? cartoons, like the narcotic world, and even Buddhism. I'm wondering about. He's sort of like, it seems like the book sort of flattens and makes these equivalent in their sense of I don't know what you'd even call it, because I feel like you're pretty ambivalent about it. It's not like necessarily positive or negative. It's just it's a question that the book's raising. Like, how do you? Am I right, or
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
right.
You're absolutely right in everything you have said. The thing is, like, I am not a postmodern in the sense I don't think everything is equivalent ethically.
Yeah, same here.
My book is a very ethical book. I'm sorry, people.
Yeah. So, all right, let's stop there for 1 second. So, I mean, can we call you? I like to think of myself as late modernist, right? Is that fair?
Yes, that would fit.
Okay.
That would fit
right.
completely.
So there's two of us.
It isn't finished and has been pushed away because it was too political. You know, that's one thing that happened. You know, and so I use a lot of these let's say like a fragmentary or mosaic landscape of different elements, and the thing is, like, I'm not a Buddhist, although I respect Buddhism as any religion of all its limitation. As any religion, I'm an anarchist, so of course I always have a problem with religion, but I'm very close to the Taoist philosophy, and that the fact that the world exists no matter, I mean, independently from us, and that we are the ones who are giving ourselves the meaning of this world, you know, and it's not linked. We think it's linked. It's not linked. It's linked in other ways, in other aspects. And so that's, I think this is why I'm call the book flat. I mean, it's because I mean, Wagner, for example, the main character, who could be an arch villain in Marvel, could be Lex Luthor. I'm not showing him as a bad guy. I'm not showing him as a bad guy. I mean, I'm showing him the way he sees himself. You know, and he's a man with a mission. Well, that's what kind of mission, but he's a man with a mission, and the mission is in itself would be seen as good.
He's a very complex character, and he's complex in the sense, for me, that, like many of I noticed afterward that in reflection that there's a lot of family in this book. There's a lot of notions of parentage and inheritance, you know, and the character of Kurt Wagner is obviously I don't even know if we would say he wrestles with it, but he has this kind of latent fascism from his family's Nazi past, and it's almost as if in his project there's a certain amount of both. He daren't recognize it. He daren't look at what that is.
No, exactly, and this is you know, this is actually a continuation from my thought from the novel called White City, which was about how Nazi ideology has been adapted or assimilated in our own culture, and that's exactly what Wagner is. You know, if you say you're a Nazi, if you say you're not a Nazi, then you're not a Nazi. Although you can have Nazi ideals, you know, it's a great Trump trick. You know, I'm not a fascist. I'm not blah blah. You know, you're saying I am. You know, and it's very interesting because it makes political stand much more complex and delicate and nuanced. And this is what I want to show. I want to show precisely that he is a Nazi. He is actually a hardcore Nazi. I mean, but the thing is also, for Nazis, it is a logical way of thinking. It's based on irrational premises, but everything can be explained and excused. And this is the danger of it. This is where it's so dangerous. Yeah,
I mean, you give even in a novella, you're able to give that idea space. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, fiction only works when you create the gray area for the reader to step into and to have those interpretations, I think. So this I was going to ask you about. I mean, there's a book with multiple perspectives, multiple characters. It's fast paced, and it's in many ways it sort of reads like a thriller. Is what kind of influences are there for you? What kind of what informs your kind of international hard-boiled kind of stuff that's going on in the book?
Well, I would say in 1970s movies, 60s and 70s movies. I mean, late 60s and early 70s, when people, I mean, what I loved in the late 60s and early 70s movies, you saw the sweat, the real sweat of the actors, you know, and and the stubble and the tired look of the women. I mean, there was something extremely documentary-like and extremely raw in these Don Siegel or other, even also Dennis Hopper film Last Movie or things like that. There is a involuntary realism in these movies that really influenced me. Plus, most of them were noir. Most of them were not optimistic. They never ended well. They were always like, or they ended well in a weird well way. So I would say that that's much more, or writers like Chester Himes, also these kind of like dark writers with a message, dark and black for Chester Himes.
Right. Yeah.
But these kind of hard-boiled novels, or Ross MacDonald.
That's really interesting. Yeah. The sort of authenticity. Yeah. It's not a stylized sweat, right? It's what is in the moment. It's almost like a verite. You know, it's like a real method, reality. The weather is the weather. The suit is sweaty because the suit is sweaty. Yeah, etc. In the there's a line in the book where you talk about where one of the characters says reflects the idea that myths don't belong to places, and you know, in your sort of recreation of New Babylon, New Zurich, and so on, there is, and the sticks. There's a collaging of things that, I mean, you've already. I think it's interesting because you've already. I get where you're coming from. You've already rejected the sort of postmodern label, right? So is your use of myth in a sense sort of more like a Campbell or a Jungian archetypal world narrative approach, or how do you see it in your writing?
Actually, I would say I'm anti-Jungian and anti-Campbell, and not that I don't respect them at all. But what I mean by that is that my grandfather was an archaeologist, and he told me one thing that I never forgot when I've been 8 or 9 years old. He said, archaeology is 5% what you find and 95% bullshit. You know, and what I find very interesting with history and myth and archaeology. I mean, I will always be on the side of archaeology because archaeology attacks history. It's a fundament of history, and yet it's always it's the part that breaks the narratives. So I'm using sticks and a lot of references on the book. The novel I'm writing now is about cultural war and use a lot of these things too. But because we are comfortable with them, we think we're comfortable. We think we have a story. Indo-Europeans exist. They never existed. There was never Indo-European, even in the European language. It's bullshit. It's Nazi invention, right? And all languages. I mean, it's hundreds and thousands of years that they develop and they mix, and of course they will have common roots and things like that. But it's not a culture. It's, you know, but we are comfortable with that. We can talk about that. If I say that, I'm sure a lot of people will be pissed off for what I just said. You know, but the proof, you know, like French archaeologists say, where are the buildings? You know, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make the reader think he or she is comfortable with the environment and just twisting it or letting her or he play with the elements I'm giving to create their own, you know, world or new world or, you know, transparent.
Understood. Yeah. There aren't many of us that could claim to be a bilingual writer. I mean, how does bilingualism play into that kind of thinking and your creative process even? Are there times when it's a real help or sometimes it's a hindrance? How do you factor bilingualism into your creative life?
Well, I've thought a lot because of this double career I have now, and the novel you published, very nicely published, The Fragments of Revolution, is the only novel that I translated from French into English that was published. So you have the exclusivity of the other of the other side, And I always say, you know, I'm a American. I'm a European with an American background. I lived in the States when I was a kid. And I think and for me, and I think all people are bilingual. And the thing is, like, it's for us, I mean, it's also a Western thing. I mean, in Africa, a lot of people speak about 4 or 5 different languages, or in India, or in China also, they're you know, but for us, there is this kind of dominant language, old political dominant language, like French or English or Spanish, you know, that, so people think, oh, it must be difficult. No, it's not difficult. It's like, it's a part of being, it's like switching, is having a quantum, it's being quantum, you know, it's just, you know, I am in a non-defined space that defines itself when I choose one or the other language to I would say it's a pretty natural way. It can be a handicap when I'm translating myself, because when I translate myself from English to French, or from French from English from French to English, I have to know that the audience is not the same. So the references, for example, in the Babylon trilogy, there are ads in the first part of the book. There are ads flashing. Also in Absinthe, I did that in Absinthe. And the book was translated to Spanish, and the translator sent me some, we exchanged some mails and say, what do I do with the ads, you know? And I said, you take Spanish ads from the 60s. You know, all the ads that are in trilogy are real ads from the 60s from America. I say, take 60, you know, to transfer the thing, you know. I really think that translations can be also adaptations. I have no problem with that, if it's of course with the agreement of the writer, or doesn't matter if he's dead.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about that kind of thing too, in terms of, yeah, translations and adaptations. Particularly, I mean, it hasn't happened in my experience yet, but yeah, something like a film. If someone was to do a film adaptation of my work, I think in a sense I'd be completely disinterested in how faithful it was. I just think of it as a, you know, as a peripheral piece, you know, a complementary piece in some way. So how do you feel about that kind of thing?
There's a project. There's a project going on around Missing Signal with James Reich, and this is the first thing I told him. I told him, this is your film. You know, it's based on my book, and we can of course, it's, you know, it's great to be working on that book, but it has to be your film. It doesn't have to be faithful, and he's really understood that. And we exchange a lot about that, and it's the thing, you know. I mean, art forms and art products have to be different. Otherwise, you get into the mainstream factory where everything is, you know, an eidolon of an eidolon of an eidolon, a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. You know? So
yeah, I mean, there's all that kind of anxiety that people have around the film version and the book version. It seems like an unhealthy kind of fixation in some ways. I think it's healthier to let that go, you know, because in some ways, I mean, the good thing is, if the film isn't like the book, then the book is still alive and well. Yes, in different ways, you know. Totally. So there is obviously, you know, the cover kind of tells you this, and it's you know, an important part of the plot. What about I was thinking about you and anarchist politics and the sort of chaos magic that occurs in the book, the sort of Crowley angles and so on. Let me think what my actual thought was. Well, I mean, yeah, in your life, I mean, I'm not sure how you feel about, I don't think I know you well enough to know properly how you feel about the occult writ large, and how that fits in with your day-to-day life, or just your creative process, or is it something just fabricated for the novel?
Yeah. I don't believe in magic. I mean, it's kind of weird to say I don't believe in magic, I don't believe in God. It's let's say magic is not a part of my life, but it's a part of my interest. It's a part of my cultural interest, because it is another narrative. It's a parallel narrative. And what is very interesting, if you look at the story of religion, gnosis, the Gnostic faith, or many of the parallel Christian or Muslim or Buddhist faith are actually the faith that have influenced culture the most. and in the most interesting way. So I'm very interested in magic or the occult, in the very large meaning of it, because it's not only Western, it can be voodoo, it can be other things, because of the what do you call it, specific positions they have, and they're like warped keys. and I like that. I find that very interesting, you know.
Yeah, me too. Gary Lachman, I think that's how you pronounce his name. It's Gary Lachman, who was a founding member of Blondie, now writes about the occult. I mean, he's pretty sick to death of the founding member of Blondie kind of thing, but he writes because he's, you know, a writer in his own right, if you like, now. And he makes the point about Isaac Newton, saying how Newton actually wrote more about the occult than he did about what we might now call the hard sciences of gravity and so on. So yeah. And I'm sort of not surprised. I'm sort of really pleased with the answer, you know, just personally. But I think it makes a lot of sense to me, as an issue of cultural curiosity and legacy. And you know, you live, it sort of doesn't matter whether you believe in it. You know, we live in the legacy of a certain amount of Gnosticism and so on. I think many writers are kind of Gnostic, even if they don't admit it, in curiosity. And I'm wondering, this sort of fits in with an idea around. To me, now we're talking about it, it fits in with an idea around your books are often are concerned with class quite often, right? And societal structures, corporations. And there's a line in the book where I'll probably butcher the quote from memory, but it's something like that the drug synth, the drug in the world that you've created, is the drug of sort of petty bourgeois idiots, right? And then there are other characters in the book who use the occult, and the occult is a bit more like wishful thinking. So, I mean, is that what you're doing? There is a kind of, and both, you know, what buying expensive drugs is a kind of corporatized wishful thinking, maybe, in the book.
Well, it's a very good and tricky question, because I mentioned Taoism before, and that's exactly, for me, a Taoist attitude I'm trying to achieve there, is that the same things, if the occult in one hand or synth drug in the other, are criticizable, are criticizable on good grounds, actually, all of them, you know. And I'm not taking any stand in there. It's characterizing it, you know, and because of different things, and everything in the book can prove them right or prove them wrong. And also, if you read all other books of the series, like The Song of Synth or Missing Signal or whatever, or The Invisible, you'll see other uses of the drug and other possibilities of the drug. And then the next novel I'm writing the same thing. But you know, it's this is the thing. I mean, I'm very focused as an anarchist on narratives, on dominant narratives, on the repetition of narratives, on things like that. And what I like with synth, the drug synth, or magic, or whatever, is that they're disruptive. They disrupt narratives, but they cannot be ignored. This is one difference between Taoism and Buddhism, is the notion of illusion, of Maya. In Taoism, you have this world. You don't have it, you know. You have to live.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the veil of Maya earlier, and I thought, maybe it's too early for that. But yeah, I'm so glad you brought it up, because it really feels like a part of the narrative structure of the book, but it also functions as a kind of critique of experience. So how? Now I'm thinking about Burroughs again, because, you know, Burroughs had this critique of the family, right? We talked about how family is in the book so much, in terms of, you know, people's memories or living up to the expectations, or what would mother think? Would mother be proud in this particular character's mind? And then there's the critiques of capitalism that are in the book. And if I remember, you know, I can't quote this from memory, but, you know, Burroughs talked about the family as the kind of the structure of evil, if you like.
Yeah, of oppression.
The basic structure of oppression, if you like. Yeah. And so is there a position that you would say, like someone coming to your books, Do you feel like there's a consistent view of that in the sort of the New Babylon world?
No, I mean, actually, I think there are only two books with families. It's this one and Swan Main. I think those are the two. I mean, although you have a couple of relationships. One thing is actually another quote from Burroughs that is very important for me is keep them guessing. So I'm using also these tropes because there are very familiar tropes in mainstream literature, the family, and I just put them there, and say, play with it, so that's one thing. The second thing also is anarchist. Family is important. I'm married. I have two kids. And people, some anarchists, evil. I'm more an anarchist than you. But the thing is, like, what is true is that the power balance, the question of power and the power balance of power starts in the family. Either you have an open family or like a lateral family or a vertical family. So I think these are the things also, and at the same time you have meaning, the well-meaning, the failure, you have all these nuances, and what I want to do, and just to go back very, very fast to your question, the two characters, Wagner and his bodyguard, that both have a family fixation, are opposite characters. And that's also one thing. It's like, it's like the yin and the yang or whatever. It's like they're united with that family problem that is eating them in many ways.
I would imagine someone could read it and come out with, it's not something I've spent time thinking about, but I could imagine certain readers coming out with a vision, with an analysis around the idea of patriarchy, matriarchy. In Wagner's case, it's through the grandfather and the father, whereas in we actually have, like, the different versions of matriarchy. There's the sort of African matriarchy in the story. There's the presidential matriarchy, but there's also Vita, the drug dispensing matriarch. Different, like, goddess forms, and they're all well, of course, none of them are idealized, none of them are perfect, none of them are representative of, there's not a hierarchy of representation in this. These are all ambivalent, flat projections, perhaps.
Yeah, it's I'm very wary of how can I say, I'm very wary of black facing myself or gender facing myself, changing the thing to I'm not colorblind, as some people say. I'm very wary of the differences and the racism and sexism. So I'm trying to find characters that are nuanced, but come out of the gendered or colored cliches that we find in many of the books that are still published today. And I'm very conscious about that, not to be politically correct, but because political correct just means one thing, is to respect the others, and to listen to the others. And if it bothers people, then they have a problem. They're part of the problem, right? So it's not to be political correct, but in the contrary, it gives me the possibilities of nuances and palettes and stuff like that, and I just had this experience with my very good friend Eugene Bacon, who's a fantastic horror writer black horror writer from Australia, and she asked me to co-write or to participate to one of the stories that was published by Fantasy magazine this month, and it's about a black woman and who creates this being to help her either get revenge or something. And she asked me to write the beings apart. And I told her yes, but I won't, that's what I said, I won't blackface myself. The being will not be part of African culture, will not, because others can do that much better than me. So I had to find another angle, And I think this is the thing. I don't want to occupy the space that others that are more legitimate than me should.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I had this other question around, we're both in, I mean, am I right? Do you still move between France and Denmark, and are you still fairly mobile despite COVID? Or are
Well, I'm
you?
not with the corona, so I haven't been to France for about 2 years now.
Okay. Yeah. But so but I am curious about how, what life in Denmark is like right now and how that has affected your writing.
Well, Burroughs said one thing about Denmark in one of his letters, because he went to Denmark in 53, something like that, 2 or 3, during his first European trip. And he says, well, Denmark is a police state without a police. And I think that's the best definition we can give. It's very civilized.
Mm-hmm.
It's very civilized. So it's for me, it has a lot of qualities. It has the old socialist structure, which makes free, like the Obamacare, free access to care or things like that, which are fantastic. But there's also a degree of self-policing that is quite irritating. But it's a great place to live. I mean, materially, it's a paradise. If you have the money to afford it, it's great. So I can't complain. I have a great job at the university. It's fantastic. At the same time, I'm keeping my critical sense. And if people read White City, they will see my vision of the Scandinavian miracle between big quotes. So
yeah. Do you I don't want to get you into trouble with the whole Denmark.
Let's have a war with Denmark.
I mean, you sort of describe it kind of like, I guess, the borough's attraction, the sort of attraction boroughs might have to a place like that is that sort of gentility, a sort of a certain amount of, despite all of his outrageous projections, there's a certain amount of repression in boroughs for sure. Do you feel like Denmark, the society you're in, is a fairly repressed, very Freudian kind of world? I mean, you're writing about family romance, and so yeah.
It's. I mean, it's. I write about what I know.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that. And what I don't know, I make up, but then I change the decor, so to hide my ignorance.
How does your writing go over at the university? Like, do your students read you?
Very few. I never tell my students I write. Usually discover it by chance. I don't teach any writing classes in university. So it's like a side job. It's like a night job anyway. So
it's your occult job.
Yeah.
All right, let's do a philosophical one then. I'm spitballing a philosophical question, and this is a tacky one but it comes off what you just said. You don't teach writing classes, and maybe you feel like I'm not going to project any ideas about that. If you were, let's do Burroughs thing. Words of advice for young people. Let's come to that. Yes. Words of advice for young people from Seb Doubinsky. Words of advice for aspiring writers, all that kind of stuff.
It's funny you asked me that, because this is the question I hate. This is the question I always, when I'm asked that. No, it's a good question. But every time I'm asked that in written interviews, I say, fuck all the writers who give advice to young writers. I will say something. I'll just say it very short. To each his own. Do your stuff, and then what comes in. I mean, this is. I think you'll agree with me, because you started the Stalking Horse Press probably for the same reason. It's the fact that one of the biggest factor in being published is luck, chance, who you meet. So what I would say to aspiring writers is to create, or to join, it depends, a non-toxic community of of souls that think the same way, that appreciate what you do and support each other, like it was in the music milieu in the 80s or in the 90s. It's everybody went to everybody's concert and tried to get the other sign on the same label and things like that. That's the thing. I mean, it's writing is a solitary exercise, but it doesn't have to be a solitary life.
Yeah, I like that. Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, the chance thing. I mean, there's so much of that in Paperclip, for sure. There's is this coincidence? Is this the occult? Is this international conspiracy? It brings that you bring that to the conventional idea of the thriller, which is really interesting to me. And yeah, I guess from my perspective, the one thing I have told students of mine at some time is, yeah, just the luck that you describe. I mean, when my first novel was read by a reader at an agency, and I think almost every day about if she'd had the flu, someone else read it.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be talking to you. So yeah, I mean, who knows? Who can say? I mean, I think I'd like to think that none of us are without any ability, but there are plenty of people with abilities in this world. So yeah, there's a lot of chance, and so be grateful for what we have, eh?
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, the world is unfair.
Yeah.
You have to accept that. I mean, you have to accept, and take your place. I mean, it's to be a bestseller writer is a career. It's a job. To be an independent writer like I am, like you are, is maybe we have less readers, but at least we're free to do what we want, and I've been doing that for 30 years now, almost.
Yeah.
So I've never got any money out of it, or a little bit symbolic money, enough to buy a beer, but I'm happy. I'm not stressed.
Yeah.
I'm free. And
Well,
that's amazing.
I think for both of us, if I sort of dare speak for you, I think it's an existential issue. It's an aesthetic and existential issue, writing, rather than a.
Yeah, I just wrote on Twitter, writing is arm wrestling with death. Mm-hmm. You'll lose. You'll lose. Just enjoy the victories as long as you can. It's that's the way it is. It's the old Jewish optimism.
That seems like that's the way it is. Seems like a perfect way to wrap up.
Well, thank you very, very much.
And no, it's wonderful to get the chance to talk to you. Yeah, Seb Doubinsky, everyone rush out and get a copy of Paperclip. Thanks to Meerkat Press. Thank you, Tricia, for generously allowing me to be part of this. I was thrilled to receive an early copy of the book. Yeah, thank you very much, Seb, and for your wisdom, wit, and integrity.
Thank you very much. Thanks to you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.